When setbacks become stepping stones, the entrepreneurial revolution led by Black women. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here today. I want to begin by acknowledging the extraordinary woman whose insights and research form the foundation of what I'm about to share with you. Crystal Johnson is not just a remarkable entrepreneur and visionary. She is a force of nature who has fundamentally changed how we understand resilience and opportunity in America today. Her groundbreaking work documenting the entrepreneurial revolution being led by Black women isn't just collecting data, it's illuminating a path forward for all of us. Crystal has dedicated her life to ensuring that stories of transformation aren't just told, but amplified in ways that reshape our collective understanding of what's possible when doors close and new ones are built instead. What Crystal has uncovered challenges everything we think we know about economic adversity and opportunity. And today I want to take you on a journey through these insights that might fundamentally change how you think about obstacles in your own life. We've all heard the conventional wisdom about economic downturns, haven't we? When jobs disappear, people suffer. When industries contract, communities collapse. When doors close, dreams die. This narrative is so deeply embedded in our collective understanding that we rarely question it. But what if I told you that this narrative isn't just incomplete? It might be fundamentally backward. What if the very moments that seem designed to diminish us are actually the catalyst for our greatest innovations? What if rejection in one arena is actually an invitation to create something entirely new? This isn't wishful thinking. This isn't a motivational poster hanging in a corporate break room. This is precisely what's happening right now across America. And it's being led by a group that has historically faced some of the most significant barriers to economic advancement: Black women. Despite headlines about job losses and economic setbacks, Black women aren't just enduring these challenges, they're actively reshaping the business landscape through entrepreneurship at unprecedented rates. They're driving much of the growth in new business creation across the country, even as they face systemic barriers in traditional employment sectors. Let me share some numbers that might shock you. In April 2025 alone, while national employment rose overall by about 175,000 jobs, over 106,000 jobs held by Black women disappeared. This represented the largest loss seen among any demographic group. These losses were tied primarily to cuts in federal employment, a sector where many have found stability, and decreased diversity initiatives reducing upward mobility elsewhere. The conventional narrative would predict devastation, economic hardship, a community in crisis. But something remarkable happened instead. In early 2025, nearly half of all new U.S. businesses were started by women. And among Black entrepreneurs, women led the charge. This wasn't a small statistical blip. It represented a seismic shift in who creates businesses in America. Since 2019, we've seen a 69% increase in the share of new businesses started by women overall. Think about that for a moment. At the very time when traditional employment was becoming less accessible, Black women weren't retreating, they were advancing in entirely new directions. I met a woman named Janelle through Crystal's research. Janelle had worked in federal government for 15 years, building a stable career that supported her family. When her department was eliminated in those April 2025 cuts, she had two young children and a mortgage. The fear was real, the uncertainty was overwhelming. But instead of spending months in a fruitless job search Competing against hundreds of other displaced workers, Janelle took a different approach. She assessed her skills, project management, compliance expertise, stakeholder engagement, and launched a consultancy helping small businesses navigate federal regulations. Within 6 months, she had replaced her income. Within a year, she had hired two other women who had lost their jobs in the same cuts. The job loss felt like the floor falling out from under me, Janelle told Crystal. But looking back, it was actually the ceiling opening up. I never would have taken this leap without being pushed. This story isn't an anomaly. It's being repeated thousands of times across the country. These entrepreneurs faced significant challenges navigating reduced access to capital, lack of institutional support due to rollbacks of diversity initiatives, and all the usual hurdles of launching a business. But rather than waiting for systems to change or opportunities to appear, they leveraged community networks and utilized digital platforms for outreach and funding. The result? A record high rate of new business formation among U.S. women and increased visibility for diverse founders across industries. But this isn't just about starting businesses, it's about thriving. Between 2019 and 2023, average revenues at Black women owned firms grew by over 32%. These gains came despite economic volatility, difficulty accessing mainstream funding sources, and market disruptions from pandemic recovery. How did they achieve this? Many shifted focus toward online sales channels and built peer support alliances within their industries. They sustained year over year revenue gains while expanding services and products offered, setting a model for adaptive resilience within minority led enterprises nationwide. Take Marlene, another entrepreneur Crystal documented. When Marlene's corporate marketing position was eliminated during a restructuring that disproportionately affected diversity hires, she took her expertise in digital marketing and created an agency specifically focused on helping other minority owned businesses establish stronger online presences. I realized that my skills weren't valued in that corporate environment, but they were invaluable to small business owners who looked like me, Marlene explained. What seemed like rejection was actually redirection to where I could have the most impact. What's particularly striking about this phenomenon is the backstory. Many of these founders left unstable jobs post pandemic or after layoffs decreased advancement opportunities. Others pivoted from corporate roles after facing glass ceilings during COVID era downturns. Some had previously thrived in stabilized families via government work before being forced into transition periods marked initially by uncertainty. But that uncertainty transformed into renewed purpose through self employment ventures. This isn't just individual success stories. This is the collective reimagining of what's possible. These entrepreneurs are helping redefine entrepreneurship demographics nationally and inspiring other underrepresented groups. They're not just creating jobs for themselves, they're creating opportunities for their communities. As Crystal Johnson emphasized in our interview, when Black women build businesses, they rarely build them just for themselves. They build them as bridges for others to cross. This brings me to three key insights that emerged from my conversation with Crystal that I believe can transform how we all think about setbacks and opportunity. First, Black women are resiliently leading an entrepreneurial renaissance. Even amid disproportionate job losses, They continue to launch businesses at historic rates, proving their capacity to transform obstacles into opportunities. The very systems that seem designed to limit them have instead catalyzed an unprecedented wave of innovation and leadership. Second, systemic barriers persist but do not define potential. Challenges such as reductions in federal jobs and rollbacks of diversity initiatives have made traditional career paths more difficult for Black professionals. However, these same pressures are motivating many to carve out new spaces as founders and leaders. The question isn't whether barriers exist, it's whether we allow them to determine our destination. Third, community impact extends beyond individual success. The rise of Black women owned businesses has led to significant increases in revenue and broader positive effects on local economies and communities. This isn't just about personal advancement, but collective empowerment. When one rises, they create pathways for others to follow. Now, you might be thinking, this is inspiring, but what does it have to do with me? I'm not a Black woman, or I'm not an entrepreneur, or I haven't faced job loss. But the principle at work here transcends any specific demographic or circumstance. It speaks to a fundamental truth about human potential that applies to all of us. The conventional wisdom tells us that rejection, setback, and closed doors are endings. They're signals to retreat, to lower our expectations, to accept limitation. But what if they're actually beginnings? What if they're invitations to create something that wouldn't have existed otherwise? Think about it. Some of history's most transformative innovations emerge not from perfect conditions, but from constraint and necessity. The greatest art often emerges from periods of profound struggle. The most impactful movements arise when conventional paths forward seem blocked. This isn't to romanticize hardship or suggest that systemic barriers are somehow beneficial. They're not. The disproportionate challenges faced by Black women in the workforce represent real inequities that demand address. But there's a profound difference between acknowledging the reality of obstacles and allowing them to define what's possible. And that's the lesson here. When those 106,000 jobs disappeared in April 2025, they weren't just statistics, they represented real people with families, dreams, and bills to pay. The initial response for many was understandably fear and uncertainty. But what happened next reveals something extraordinary about human resilience. Rather than simply seeking replacement jobs in systems that had proven unstable, many of these professionals assessed their skills, identified market needs, and launched ventures that leveraged their expertise in new ways. They transformed from job seekers to job creators, from employees to founders, from participants in economic systems to architects of new ones. And in doing so, they didn't just recover lost income, they created new possibilities for themselves and others. As Crystal Johnson noted in our conversation, the greatest power move is refusing to play by rules designed for your limitation. Sometimes the door closes because you're meant to build your own house. I want you to let that sink in for a moment. Sometimes the door closes because you're meant to build your own house. What would happen if we all approached setbacks with this mindset? What if rejection became not a verdict on our worth, but an invitation to create something entirely new? I challenge you today to identify one area in your life where you've experienced rejection or limitation. Maybe it's a career path that hasn't unfolded as you hoped. Maybe it's a relationship that didn't work out. Maybe it's a community that hasn't fully embraced your gifts. Now ask yourself, what might be possible if I stopped knocking on that door and started building my own house instead? What skills, insights, or perspectives do I have that might create value in ways I haven't yet imagined? The entrepreneurial revolution being led by Black women today isn't just changing business demographics, it's demonstrating a profound truth about human potential that applies to all of us. Our greatest limitations often contain the seeds of our most significant innovations. The next time you face rejection, I want you to remember this moment. I want you to remember the 106,000 Black women who turned job loss into business creation. I want you to remember that sometimes what looks like the end of the road is actually just the beginning of a path you couldn't see before. Because the most powerful response to a closed door isn't knocking harder, it's building your own house. And in doing so, you might create not just a new opportunity for yourself, but a new possibility that others never imagined was available. The world doesn't just need more people willing to persist within existing systems, it needs more architects of new ones. It needs you to see the invitation hidden within your next rejection. Will you accept it? Thank you.